So I feel like God has molded me to be able to do what
Yeah.
I'm doing.
Yeah.
And as long as it's making an impact, I'll keep on doing it. But you keep on doing it, and it's gonna become second
And
nature,
doing it
and
and
doing
doing
it
it
and doing
and
it,
doing it.
and
And
you're
yeah.
gonna get so comfortable, and you're gonna sit there and do like me and think, how in the world aren't I supposed to be scared to get up there?
Hello, everybody.
Welcome back to A Stroke of Luck. We're so glad that you're here. And today we have a special guest joining us, Tim Sutton. How are you doing?
Doing great. I appreciate you all inviting me to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
It's been great communicating with you and learning about your background. If you want to just introduce yourself briefly, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes.
Absolutely. My name is Tim Sutton. I am actually retired as of 2 months ago, law enforcement officer from the state of Virginia, and had spent about the past 20 years doing a lot of work with families dealing with disabilities, which I prefer to call differabilities because everybody has abilities, but sometimes people just do things differently. I started working in 2002, 2003 with families. My agency had gotten involved with a program that dealt with the wandering elopement issue where individuals go missing, get away from caregivers, parents. And I started going out and meet families and putting watch size transmitters on them to help in case they were to elope or wander. The caregiver calls 911 and gets in touch with me and some of my officers. And we have equipment we can actually come out and track and bring them home. And I started to realize that a lot of these families were dealing with more than just their wandering and elopement. They were dealing with a lot of calls for service. Law enforcement, fire EMS were responding to a lot of calls for service that involved some type of differability, but we hadn't been trained on it. So we were going in, reverting back to our training and doing the best that we could.
Right.
However, you don't know what you don't know. So sometimes we were not doing the best or most effective job that we could do. So I started to work to educate myself even more and more and travel around and train public safety on some differabilities, specifically autism, other intellectual disabilities, and Alzheimer's and dementia, so that when the officers did respond, they could do the job more effectively. And I just saw the impact that it was making on the families and the community. I think it's very interesting when law enforcement, when Guns and Badges shows up, and they're able to speak intelligently to these families. What a breath of fresh air it's got to be. So I've been doing that, the traveling across the country, teaching for about 15, 16 years while I'm still a law enforcement officer. And I'd been looking for a way to get out of law enforcement to kind of expand that. Nothing came to where I could just travel and teach full time.
Right.
But I've had another opportunity to gain a job with a grocery company here in the Northeast and work security for them. And they're building a distribution plant in Virginia, which I will be working at in their asset protection program. But the company is very big into inclusion and working with people with differabilities.
Yeah.
So I was able to retire 2 months ago, move on, and still spend days off spreading the word, teaching whenever I can. And I just happened to come across one of my trainers up here in Rochester. We got into a discussion, and she kind of introduced us, and we had a great conversation. And fortunate for me, you invited me to be here.
Yeah, and we're so thankful to have you here.
Thank
Deanna,
you for your service.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Yeah,
Very welcome.
Dionna and I were listening to you talk, and Deanna's mom was in here working on her puzzles, and she was just every
Flawed.
time I look over, she was nodding, like you were saying all these words,
Right.
and she was like, yes, yeah, wow, and then we hung up, and she's like, you've got to have him on that podcast.
Oh, well, I appreciate all of y'all. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, she's out with the grandmother right now, so she'll be back, and she's been wanting to meet you.
Well, I
so
hope we get a chance.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Definitely.
So one of the things that we start out every podcast is I can English today. One of the things we start out every podcast with is we call it a thought with. And as our special guest, we kind of open it up, no specific topic in mind.
Right.
Whatever is on your mind that you want to talk about, the floor is yours.
No, I just, it's been an interesting transition from law enforcement to what I'm doing now, and it's similar. It's asset protection, but it's really different in the fact that you're our asset. We're trying to protect the quality of this company and the image of the company, as opposed to being out there trying to, you know, protect and serve. But I still, what's on my mind, being here today, and I've wondered how I'm going to be able to continue spreading the word. I've had a couple over the past week, a couple organizations have actually reached out to me. Hey, would you come do classes and train some parents of kids with differabilities? And the state of Virginia actually is interested in me coming out and doing a class for public safety in Northern Virginia in May. But it's, I'm along for the ride, and through my mind and being able to come out over here and sit and visit with you all, I kept thinking about how we can work with each other and introduce you all to some of the people I do a podcast called A New Perspective, hosted by Tim Sutton, and I bring people on with differabilities or who are making an impact in that community, in that world. And I just thought about the impact, I'm 8 hours, 9 hours away, and how our paths have crossed, where we can, you can get the word to me and I can get your all's word out in Virginia and whoever's
Yeah.
listening, and the same up here, because maybe people will get a different perspective of things, or a new perspective
Absolutely.
of why I do what I do and why you all do what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. With that, I had a stroke at 14 years old
Right.
in swimming sectionals, and now I have aphasia.
Hmm.
I had severe aphasia after my stroke.
Right.
I was mute. I was not writing, reading, or speaking. I was totally mute. And I went to
Drive on. Were you talking
Yeah.
with the car?
yeah, I went to Drive On, it's called, after a stroke or a TBI, going to that program to learn how
Right.
to drive with modifications in their cars. And I have now license and stuff, and I have now with my car a switch the pedals around,
Right.
and can't say it on air, but
Oh,
it
the
is-
name.
yeah.
It's just the one-handed steering now.
Right.
Yeah, and I never pulled over,
Right.
but in my lifetime, probably pulled over.
Right.
And I have a card saying I had a stroke and I have aphasia and stuff. And I have on the back, it is like my name, my address,
Right.
everything on the back.
Right.
And with my license, I have the modifications already on my license
Right.
in the back
Yeah.
Okay.
as well.
And
Is-
that's one thing that your mom was concerned about. We were talking the other day is if you ever
Mhm.
get pulled over, none of the law enforcement in this area
Right.
would have any idea. And to them, she might
Right.
sound intoxicated.
Right.
Exactly.
And then do a field sobriety test. She doesn't look disabled. There's no way she could walk a straight line like they want
Right.
to walk. So her mom
A
tried to get
normal
a training with
Mhm.
Grease PD.
Right.
And they weren't interested in having that type of a training. And it's unfortunate.
The sad part about it, and it's just like most things, agencies are not interested in the training until they have that unfortunate situation happen.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then they're
Yep.
playing catch up. I'm trying to get out there so the agencies can hopefully avoid that unfortunate situation. And one push, I deal a lot with autism, Alzheimer's, other forms of dementia, and under your circumstances, as well as I've got one podcast I did with the lady Val Abbott, who has a book out called Pat a Pillow about her daughter's early onset of hearing loss.
Mm.
There's so many invisible disabilities.
Yeah.
That looking at somebody you can't pick up on. Down syndrome, you can look at somebody with
Mhm.
Downs and go, okay, something's a little different. But I had actually worked in 2013. I had a mother contact me and wanted to know why I was teaching autism, intellectual disability to law enforcement. She didn't understand the correlation. And I asked her, I said, "Do you have a child with autism?" And she said, "Yeah, my son's 8 years old, JP." And I said, "Well, I want you to look at some of his behaviors now and realize in 20 to 25 years, he's probably going to have some of those behaviors still.
Mm-hmm.
And let's assume he's out in public on his own and gets called in as being a suspicious male loitering or something. And they call 911 to have the police respond.
Mm-hmm.
Would you want that officer to understand autism when they approached your son?" And that light bulb went off in her head. And she's like, "Oh, I know Senator so and so. I know." And between she and I and Department of Motor Vehicles and many other entities who got involved, we tried to get a bill passed. And to be honest with you, what I wanted was a bill passed so that the vehicle could be linked to a
Yeah.
differability.
Yeah.
Because my thought was, okay, if I go to hit the blue lights on this individual and try to pull them over and that vehicle takes off, okay, maybe I'm in a pursuit. My dispatcher is immediately running that license plate. Now, if it came back linked to autism, intellectual disability,
It completely changes how you,
Yeah.
you want to approach
Exactly.
I
that.
could turn the
Yeah.
blue lights off and just see the behavior of the car. Maybe it slows up. Maybe I'm not dealing with a criminal. The answer I got when I wanted to produce that type of legislation was from Department of Motor Vehicles. No, we're not going to do that. That costs money. But what they did do, and it's the first step, but there are many steps to a ladder.
Mm-hmm.
That first step, they did say, hey, what we can do is have people on their driver's license or their Department of Motor Vehicles issued ID on the back. We'll put ASD for autism spectrum disorder /
Any
ID.
disability.
Anything.
Yeah.
It's a great step. However, if officers have not been trained on any of these differabilities, what does it mean to them when they look at the back of the card?
Yeah.
And the lady who her daughter has hearing impairment, we got to talking. She drives, and I was amazed when I did press conferences at the General Assembly in Virginia that the reporters were asking me. They said, "You mean people with autism drive?" And I
Definitely.
said, "There are people with autism driving. They're employed and working in the community, and you're interacting with them
Yeah.
almost every day, but you can't see the difference. You might know, well, they were kind of rude or they didn't have a lot of social interaction that's typical for them, but you're interacting with them constantly." I said, but if officers had not been trained, is it going to mean anything to them? And many of these parents are scared to death of what's going to happen
Yeah.
to their child later in their life. And there's studies out there to show that individuals with autism are actually 7 times more likely to have an encounter with law enforcement than a neurotypical individual.
Yeah.
And this lady, Val Abbott, whose daughter had hearing issue, her daughter's driving. And she says she was concerned about her daughter getting pulled over. And I said, a regular traffic stop, you've got paperwork that you can show. They can see something when they walk up. But I said, when they come up, a regular traffic stop, yeah, that could go smoothly. The officers could work their way around that. I said, however, if your daughter happens to be in the area of a robbery that just occurred and her vehicle matches the description.
And it's not going to be a regular traffic stop.
No, she will
Exactly.
get pulled over probably. And officers will be there, probably 4, 5, 6 of them. They're not approaching her, but they're out there with their guns pointed towards her, yelling at her commands to get out of the vehicle. And when she can't hear, what is she going to do? So that's why I think having that link on that license plate for those officers,
Yeah.
I was a police officer about 34 years, and I had never had to pull the trigger on anyone, and I never wanted to. But I believe that if my life was in danger or somebody else's life was in danger, I believe I could have pulled the trigger. And I think I would be okay with that. But that's one of those things you don't know until you've actually done it.
Exactly.
Now, if I was in a situation where I believed my life or somebody else's was in danger and I pulled the trigger and I killed somebody, only to find out they weren't trying to hurt anybody and I misinterpreted a behavior, that's something I've got to live with for the rest of my life. And I don't ever want any officer or anybody to have to do that. So that's why I'm very passionate about what I do and getting out there and advocating and training. I'll train anybody and everybody. I've trained medical professionals. I've been to colleges and done some training because with autism, most of them are very brilliant.
Yeah.
But they have social interaction skills, communication challenges, and sometimes repetitive behavior challenges. But they're very brilliant and they're in colleges, and people are starting to realize, hey, we've got these students here. Um, my main focus was law enforcement because we are issued tools that hurt people and take lives. And that's why I think it's imperative that law enforcement, along with everybody else, if you come in contact with the public, I think you ought to have training. But law enforcement, I think there's a dire need to give them training on all differabilities.
And it's unfortunate that there is a lot of issues that it's portrayed in the media now.
Right.
But one good outcome that I've started to see out of all of that is communities are taking that more serious.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's usually the communities first that, like you said, that have the issue.
Right.
RPD, one of the local agencies here, they killed a guy a couple of years back because they just didn't understand. I don't think he had a disability. I think he might have been intoxicated, but and maybe he also had a disability. The details are escaping me, but if they had the proper training on how to just approach people in a different light, that might not have happened.
Right. And, the big push across the country has been CIT training, crisis intervention training, to deal a lot with mental health. And mental health is a disability. There's Dave Whalen at Niagara University. I've been to his classes. He does a disability awareness training. And he's done studies that says about 49% of all encounters with law enforcement involve somebody with a disability.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you mandate? And that's the problem. I think right now there are only about 6 or 7 states that mandate training for autism and intellectual disability. But why wouldn't you go ahead and mandate training? And chiefs and sheriffs don't want any more training. However, I think the way the population is, with 1 in every 44 births being autism, you got other disabilities there. Over 6 million people in this country, I believe, with Alzheimer's, dementia. Why wouldn't you go ahead and train your people? Those problems, and I hate to call them problems, but those issues are not going away.
Yeah.
It's not a question of if you're going to interact with somebody dealing with it. The question is, when are you going to be dealing? Why not prepare your officers to do their job more effectively?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've been helping, and Dee, maybe you can touch on this a little more, helping you in your master's degree program, really seeing, because she's in disability studies, really seeing the origins of why nobody wants to deal with this problem. And it goes back to we, in the entire world, but specifically here in the U.S., we think that people with disabilities are less. And it's ingrained in us where we need to push them to the outside. If we just ignore them, then our life is happy. We're in a more progressive state of mind, and so now fortunately we're slowly playing catch up to where we should have been.
I'll tell you interesting. I had some conversations. There's a lady that lived in the county actually that I was working, Deborah Rue, she's got an organization called Rue Global Impact. It's about all disabilities around the world. And we've had discussions, and they're mostly before COVID came. But she was talking about even on the other side of the globe, how, it used to be older people running the countries, and their philosophy was if you had a disability, then apparently somebody in your family did something, and you're being punished for it. With younger people coming into power now and in those high up positions, they're starting to realize it's not necessarily the case. So there is a big push. There's a Billion Strong as a nonprofit I'm a part of, also through Rue Global Impact. The big push is to train up governments to understand disabilities and reach out and help these individuals and their families, and realizing no, you're not cursed. This happens, but the fact is, whether you got a disability or not, you matter.
Exactly.
Everybody matters. And me, even though I do it on a small scale, that's what I'm working with a nonprofit. It's betterunderstanding.org. And what we do in our area is we try to have events, parties, and things for people with differabilities. We want to advocate for them. We want to teach them how to advocate for themselves. But a lot of times, individuals with differabilities are the ones that invite people to come to their birthday party, and nobody shows up.
Yeah.
Or they don't get invited to the birthday parties. So we have dance parties. We have Christmas parties. I have a Santa Claus who was a century Santa Claus. He came in. I did a training at a police department, Richmond Police Department, all day training. Santa Claus showed up. He wanted to understand all of this,
Mhm.
and he's working trying to get me involved in more Santa Clauses across the country because the helpers for the real Santa Claus, but anybody involved in that needs to understand because many of these individuals with differabilities have never had the opportunity to sit with Santa. He told me of an issue he had where a little girl kept walking past back and forth and just kept saying, "Please don't say ho ho ho. Please don't say ho ho ho." And he said, "Hey, sweetie, I'm not gonna say it. Come here." And she came up to him and she got to talk to Santa Claus, but he knew not to say ho 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 because it would set her off. But so many of these individuals and these kids, even adults, have not had an opportunity to visit with Santa.
Right.
So he loves every Christmas when we have these parties, and we always ask that they register online on our website, betterunderstanding.org. Tell us, who they are, what they like, what they want from Santa. And we've got civic groups that actually purchase the gifts for Santa to give them a gift
Wow.
that they wanted
Wow.
from Santa.
Wow.
And it makes a huge impact. And these parents show up with their kids, or, individuals show up there. I mean, we had a 62-year-old lady that all she wanted for Santa Claus was a baby doll. And when she came up there and sat down, he gave her a baby doll. And she was so excited. So it's just, when I was sworn as a police officer, I was not sworn to protect this population or that population. I was sworn to protect and serve all populations.
Right.
Mhm.
And this is one population that needs a better understanding.
Yeah.
People, need to understand what's going on with those individuals and the struggles and the battles that the families are dealing with. And they need to realize that they matter.
Yeah. And Dionna, when you were saying about how, oh, did you get some questions? Yeah. Yeah. So I'll say
Yeah.
it into the microphone so it picks it up better. One of our TikTok commenters said that we in the U.S. are better with disability education. And there are other countries that lock people with disabilities away. And to further that, I can't remember what country it is, but it's still a common practice that if your child is born with a disability, they just kill the baby.
Right.
Well, and that's the thing is I read in my master's a thing about going into the Holocaust, and they had the people who have disabilities come to like get killed.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And it was so sad to read that.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I was telling you about Rube Global Impact. They're really trying to, and I'm hoping those other countries, but that's the thing. They've been victimized just because of that disability.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And hopefully with the younger groups coming into, government positions,
Mhm.
some of them are asking for trainings to understand what's going on. But, all you can do is try to reach everybody you can reach. Some of them are not going to let you in. They're not
Yep.
going to, but you can keep banging on that door and banging on that door.
Hey guys, I am so glad you're listening into our show. We need to tell you about Patreon.
That's right. We have a Patreon channel where our most dedicated listeners can show their support and get extra benefits like early episodes, and everything is ad-free. In addition, Dionna puts out a monthly newsletter and a lot of extra great content like behind the scenes and bonus merchandise discount codes.
Exactly. Way to go, Tyler.
So we want to see you over there at the Patreon, and we have many different tiers for you to choose from. Feel free to go check it out. The link is in the show notes. And also, one quick thing, we have a TikTok channel, D, right?
Yes,
So,
we do.
Yeah, if you like the content that we're putting out, go see us over on TikTok as well.
Back to the show. A stroke survivor was in the government recently.
Oh
who
yeah, he was
had,
on the news a couple days ago.
aphasia.
Yeah, it was
as
on the news
well.
ago, and he recent stroke survivor, and he's been battling depression because of the fallout of
Oh,
the injury.
Right.
Going into the hospital for
And-
treatment
And
now.
yeah, and not that it's good to nobody should have a stroke.
Right.
It's terrible.
Mhm.
But having somebody in a position to see firsthand how difficult his
Right.
life is going to be. Hopefully, I'm rooting for him. I hope
yeah.
he
Yeah.
stays and he fights through whatever he's going through, because we need people like
Right.
him in positions of power.
Yeah.
And that's going towards your goals. I don't know as if you ever want to be a politician, D, but
No.
being able to influence those
Right.
types of
Mhm.
people, because you've seen it from both ends, where before your stroke you were popular, everybody liked you, you were an athlete, and how many friends over the years just
Like after my
you've got
stroke.
like 2 left that I know of from
Right.
from high school.
Because like I was like the first day in 10th grade, I went back to school
hmm
with cut hair because I had surgery on my head,
Right.
and cut hair, and I had a AFO on my leg.
Right.
Which is a type of brace for people
Right.
listening.
Yes. And I walked in, everybody stared at me.
hmm
And I had kind of no speech at the time. And I didn't say, "Hey, how are you?" and stuff
Right.
now versus then.
Right.
And with that, it was my mom is in the shot.
Oh, she's coming in. That's okay.
But
Coming from the shadows.
yeah.
You can just cut through real quick.
Yeah.
Go ahead, finish
Anyway,
your thought.
with that, what are we talking about?
I think you were just giving a life example of what you experienced.
Yeah, and everybody stared at me,
Right.
and like over like the high school, going into class and stuff, like I know people, but now just 2 friends
Right.
Yeah.
now. I mean,
So you're living it firsthand, and you know.
And it's not because of anything you did. It's just something that happened. And they,
Yeah.
exactly. And 10 months without seeing my friends.
right.
Well, yeah, I visited
Right.
them, but only for an hour or
Right.
2 versus going into school again
Right.
with everybody.
And I mean,
And-
you're a straight A college student in your master's degree program. You are by no means not
Yeah.
an intelligent person. But we just recorded last weekend a podcast episode that's going to come out that talks about a specific incident where you were
Oh, yeah.
you were bullied, and she had what, if you look at the definition for a federal hate crime,
hmm
this girl bullied Dionna and openly admitted it and thought nothing was wrong.
Right.
Like,
Mhm.
what do you mean? She's a child. She's less than human.
Right.
And she, honest to God, believed every word out of her mouth. And it's just amazing that just because of an injury
Right.
that caused this disability, that people believe that's an acceptable way to treat people.
And that's why we need more advocates out there. You know, a
Mhm.
lot of people come to
Exactly.
me and they go, "Why are you teaching what you teach? You don't have kids with disability." And I've got a son who's 23, and I got twin girls that are 20, and no, they don't have a diffability. But and I've had a lot of parents come to my classes, and they obviously come in with an attitude. And I just do what I do. I start teaching, and when I give them the first break, a lot of them will come up and say, "I came in here to tear you apart because you don't have a child on the spectrum or with any differability." And I said, "Look, I'm not trying to tell you anything different than you don't already know. You live it 24/7. You know your loved one, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be successful if you try to interact with somebody else. I'm trying to give you a snapshot. As an officer, we had to respond and deal with this. And with the knowledge that I had been given, this is kind of how we dealt with it. And then I got a lot of hypotheticals. What if this happens? How do you, and specifically with your dementias and autism, if you've met one, you've met one. Every single one is different. And I think we need more advocates out there that see this as important. No, I don't have kids on the spectrum. My children are neurotypical. But having people go out and advocate, and I would encourage, I want to give a plug to a young lady. She's on our board along with her brother, but Emily, if you look up emilysbracelets.com, Emily has cerebral palsy. And part of her working up her skills and dexterity and being able to tactile, part of her courses and training or teaching were putting beads on pipe cleaners. Well, her older brother, PJ, is an amazing older brother, but they developed Emily's bracelets. She makes bracelets. She's actually got one, just recently put one together. We voted on it, our board, for a better understanding, ABU. But she does different awareness bracelets and sells them online. And each one, they're about $5 or $6, but a portion goes to this, nonprofit, a portion goes to another. But it's emilysbracelets.com. I would check her out. She's been selling bracelets all over the country, even to Hawaii. And her brother PJ, like I said, they're on our board. And it's all about going out there and raising awareness. And I don't, even if it's something as simple as having a beaded bracelet on it, somebody comes up and says, "Hey, what's that? What does that mean?" Sharing the information. Say, "Hey, check out Emily's bracelets." Yeah. She's, a young girl with a differability, but she's absolutely amazing. And I had her and her brother on my podcast. And you sit there and there's so much going on in that head, but that you wouldn't think. And I told her, I said, "You're such a pretty girl." And she started smiling and looking down. She understood everything that was going on. She might process it a little differently or not respond as you would expect, but she knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And she's learning to do things. And nobody with a differability is less than.
Yeah.
They're who they are.
And can I just say for a second that I love that phrase, differability.
Differability.
I love it.
I mean, everybody has abilities. Some people just do things differently. And I mean, I've got a young man who's an artist in Fredericksburg, Virginia, Joey Fry. I've had him on my show, my podcast, and with his mom showing his paintings. And he actually made a painting for me. And I'll tell you, he's an amazing young man, has his own art studio. He's early 20s. And I'll go visit. When I go home, I need to go visit him because I saw a painting he made and I want the painting. But he's one of those guys, and Joey Fry, it's Autism by Joey.
Okay.
But you can give him 6 or 7 things that are special to you. Tell him those, and he will incorporate those into a painting. So that painting doesn't mean anything to anybody else, but it sure means something to the person that asked, commissioned him to do the painting.
Oh, I love that.
But there's, and I tell families, I know with a lot of differabilities, it's a struggle. And I tell a lot of my autism parents, I said, your family member is so smart. I said, how many people do you think with autism specifically were responsible for getting these rockets up into space? And, Silicon Valley. And I said, be honest with you, I think if it was not for autism, we'd probably be one of the dumbest countries on this planet. And I often wonder, because I think the term is overused a lot, but I tell a lot of the parents that individuals on the spectrum are picking up sensory things. It's all sensory driven, but they're picking up on things that we walk past and don't even realize are there. The smells, all the sensory stuff. And I said, in some ways, I kind of wonder if we're the ones with the special need and they get it because they're so in tune to things.
I love that perspective.
Because they will, I mean, you could be with somebody and they can tell you what's going on around you and you don't even have a clue it's happening.
Yeah.
I mean, if they've got heightened sense of hearing, I mean, they would hear the air coming out of the vents, and then you get teachers in school going, your child doesn't pay attention. They seem distracted. Well, maybe that sound is about 100 times louder to them and they can't concentrate. So you really have to take a lot of that stuff into consideration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know we've kind of been talking about it in everything, but could you just touch on the non-for-profit that you're a VP of and how that position that you were fortunate enough to be a part of came to be?
Sure. Back in 2011, I actually started my own consulting business. I was doing work with the county in my law enforcement capacity, And I just formed a consulting business, which is an LLC, traveling around teaching. And about that time, our county actually had one of the largest searches in Virginia history for a 9-year-old with autism, non-speaking. It used to be called nonverbal, but
Mm-hmm.
he could make verbalization, squeals and screams. So he was non-speaking, but he went missing in a park in our county, it's a Civil War battlefield park. So it's trenches and tough terrain. North Anna River runs right along it. And if you don't know, please pass the word. Number one cause of death for autism and elopement is drowning. They will walk right into water, run right into water,
Wow.
even if they can't swim. So I had my officers get to the water as soon as possible, and the search went on for 5.5 days.
Oh, wow.
And we actually found Robbie, the little boy. We found him alive on the 6th day.
Oh, wow.
And I think autism saved his life, because with autism, you typically don't have fear. And we had a lot of searchers come in and say, hey, they were worried. They saw coyotes, bear, foxes. Something has probably done something to him. And I thought, if he's not in that water, and we've checked the water, I said, he's probably running around playing hide and seek, because animals typically attack because they sense fear.
Fear.
If he's out there running around like he belongs, I think there's a good chance they'd leave him alone. So we did find him 5.5 days later. And I started getting calls from around the country asking about searches for individuals on the spectrum. And then I had a lot of families coming to me going, you ought to start a nonprofit. Well, I had so much on my plate. Well, about a little over a year ago, I had an autism mom come to me and say, I want to help you. We need to get this nonprofit started. And what they did, they wanted to keep a better understanding, because that was the name of my LLC.
Mm-hmm.
But we found out you can also have a nonprofit by the same name, just it's a nonprofit. Okay. So we formed a nonprofit, ABU, a betterunderstanding.org. I told her she needed to be president of that. She's a single mom with 2 kids on the spectrum. Lauren and I'm losing his name right now, but her 2 kids, and it'll come to me in a minute. But one's 23, the other's 26, and I said I'll be vice president. And we've brought on. I've got an attorney on our board. I've got Jeff Katz, who is actually a radio host in Richmond. Does some work on Fox News occasionally, but he's got a daughter with a differability. I've been on his shows numerous times. Lauren and Carrie, I'm sorry. And so we met, and we've got our board, and you can go to betterunderstanding.org and see everybody that's on the board. But our goal was to get out there and raise awareness and advocate, teach them how to advocate for themselves. And we've had the dance parties at a park. We have a DJ there. And we got rocks for them to paint. We have food, people donating things like crazy, and group homes coming. And it was interesting, because the group homes, the individuals running the group homes coming up saying, we can't believe y'all are doing this, because we have nothing to take them to do. And y'all are doing this for them. Why? It's because we have a heart for them. We have a passion for them. And we do the Christmas parties and things like that. So over the past year, we're trying to raise funds so we can do more and more and getting involved, looking for sponsors to get involved in what we're doing. And our goal is just to reach out to the community. And I started with my podcast, A New Perspective, hosted by Tim Sutton, to raise awareness for people who are doing big things. I brought Jay Allen, who was on The Voice. His mom had dealt with Alzheimer's, been diagnosed when she was 51, and she passed when she was 54. But one of them, Lynn Martin, who's on our board, does our social stuff, all the functions. She reached out to The Voice, and within an hour, they said, Jay wants to talk to y'all. He'd love to be on your podcast.
Wow.
So I got to talk to him about his mom and his story. And he's introduced me to some other people dealing with Alzheimer's who go around and talk about, as long as they can, they want to be a voice. So yeah, we, over the past little over a year ago, we started the nonprofit. I've been doing my podcast, just raising awareness, and, I was still doing my law enforcement job, looking for an opportunity to, get out, find something with salary and benefits where I could, and I got into law enforcement. I went to James Madison University. I got a business degree, started working on a master's MBA, and I was burnt out from school, 1989. And 2 friends came to me and said, hey, we applied with, Chesterfield County Police Department. You ought to come take a test. Yeah, I could go for a job. So I went and tested. 6 months later, I'm standing at a flagpole getting yelled and screamed at with a shaved head. going, what in the world did I get myself into? And I said, I'll do it for a couple more years and, go do it. So I don't have to look back wondering what if. 33, 34 years later, I got to the point where, okay, I want to see what's next. And I don't want to look back wondering what if. So I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where I'm headed. But as long as I can reach out and advocate for families and individuals dealing with differabilities, that's what I want to do. I'd love to be able to turn that into a full-time gig.
Right.
But,
yeah,
until people wake up to the fact that they need the training. And I'll tell you, law enforcement is a tough crowd if you're going to go teach law enforcement, because a lot of it is ego.
Oh, yeah.
And for somebody without law enforcement experience coming into a classroom of police officers trying to teach them something, you get many of them sit back and go, you don't know what you don't see what I see. You don't experience and they kind of shut down. So I've had a lot of autism parents or individuals with differabilities say they're going, I'm like, you need to get a police officer, somebody who has been a police officer to stand up with you in front of that crowd, because it adds credibility to you. But it's neat when I go into a class and I've got 50 or 60 people, officers in there, and I'm like, hey, y'all, how many of y'all were told to be here? And they're like, I said, y'all really looking forward to today talking about Alzheimer's and autism and all. Yeah, okay, well, yesterday was legal update, so it couldn't be any worse than that. And I'm like, you're going to be surprised. And they leave and they come up and they're like, this is the best class I've ever had. And my thing is, I don't want to get up in front of a group and talk just to be heard. If I feel like the Lord's given me the ability to be able to get the information out in a relevant way, that they really get it. And I tell students, if it ever looks like I'm up there because I just want to be in front of a group of people, somebody please tell me so I never get up there again. As long as they're getting it and see the relevance, then I will keep doing it as long as I can.
Hey guys, we need to tell you about our sponsor, Cardinal Artworks.
That's right. Cardinal Artworks is our exclusive provider of really great merchandise.
They have cutting boards, t-shirts, cups, you name it.
That's right. Scott and Christina over at Cardinal Artworks are amazing. They're also the exclusive provider of all of the merchandise for the Dionna and A Stroke of Luck brand. So make sure you check them out. We're going to have a link in the podcast description below.
Enjoyed the show.
I love that. So, Dionna, do you have any questions or comments or stories that you want to share with Tim before we close out the show?
Well, I went to intense therapy out of state, and they have no intense clinics anywhere in New York State. And I went out of state, and I am probably in 10, 15 years having a intense clinic opened here.
Right.
So that's one of your goals.
New York State. Because they have a program after a incident or TBI or stroke. It's
so they treat acute, but not the chronic.
Right.
Yes. And one day,
One day,
the clinic, and I went to the drive-on place and stuff, and having a second drive-on in the program with my clinic as well.
Yeah. And then one of the things that I'm really proud of you is you have your first keynote speech coming up next month.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so
awesome.
One thing that is really easy for Dionna to talk about her experiences that she's gone through,
right?
Because she's told them over and over again,
right?
So we're working on her ability to talk broadly about all sorts of differabilities and with all sorts of different people,
right?
And the other day she said, I don't think I can do this keynote speech because of my aphasia. Sure. And she, in an hour, memorized the entire introduction to her keynote speech.
Right.
And it was amazing to see, because if I were right now, I was like, Dionna, tell me the story about the day of your accident.
Right.
it would come out and you'd barely notice that there's anything with her speech that's different.
Yeah.
And she was just constantly worried, like, I don't know if I have the ability to do a speech because it's not what I know. And we
Well,
proved her wrong.
well, the more you do it, I'll tell you, and a lot of people don't believe it. Before, in 2003, I started running the tracking system, working with individuals who wander and elope. And prior to that, I was scared to death to speak in front of anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And when we started running it, I had a Ruritan group call and say, "Hey, would you come speak and tell us about it?" And I was like, "Sure, of course I will." And I hung up and I said, "Oh my gosh, what did I get myself into?" So I was actually working that night in uniform, had everything on, and I actually carried an extra T-shirt in the back of my police car. And I went and got there, and I had to go in the bathroom and change because I was sweating so bad. I was scared to death. So I came back out, and they introduced me, and I went up and I started talking. And I finished, and when I came off the stage, the lady goes, "Do you know how long you were up there?" I was like, "No, ma'am." She said, "You were up there for 45 minutes.
Wow.
And I'm like, "I am so sorry. I am sorry." I was like, "Nobody wants to listen to me. I am sorry. I am so sorry." All I could think was, all those 50, 60 people would probably going, "Would you please shut up so we can leave?" And she goes, "They loved it." And she goes, "But you didn't look at your notes." And I was like, I had notes sitting up on the podium. So I had to go back up and get them. And I'm like, this is odd. Well, then I kept getting put in situations where I had to do it, and I had to do it. And honestly, I feel like the Lord changed me and molded me. And then I get an invite to go to the closing ceremonies for the Special Olympics at University of Richmond.
What?
And I'm like, okay. And I walked in, and there are 3,000 people. And I'm like, wow. And somebody came up and they said, "What are you going to say?" And I'm like, I have no idea.
Yep.
And I get up there and I just do it. And I've done classes, Georgia Bureau of Investigations, myself and a fellow police officer who lives in Texas now, Hank Levinson. Hank and I went out there and did a class for 300 police officers and administrators. In Atlanta, the governor was there, attorney general, and we got up and did an 8-hour course. And now, and of course we have the news show up wanting to do a story, and Hank's like, "Yeah, I don't do that." I'm like, "Okay." So I go get in front of the camera and I'm just sitting there talking to him. So I feel like God has molded me to be able to do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And as long as it's making an impact, I'll keep on doing it. But you keep on doing it, and it's going to become second nature.
Doing it and doing it
and doing it.
Doing it.
And you're gonna get so comfortable, and you're gonna sit there and do like me and think, how in the world aren't I supposed to be scared to get up there?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm supposed to be scared to death to get up there and do it.
Yeah.
But I'm not big into the logistics, setting this up, setting that up, doing all. I'm like, somebody just tell me, okay, go up there and start talking.
That's how she is.
That's what I prefer.
I'm like, we're doing it this time, this date. I'll set everything up. You
Right.
get the hard job. You get to sit there and be the star of the show.
Well, I had a speaking arrangement before the virus.
Right.
A week before, actually.
Wow.
And I went to Utica College in New York City, New York State.
Oh.
And it was only for 45 minutes.
Mhm.
I talked for 1.5 hours
Yeah.
Right.
with they had OT and PT
Right.
students in the class.
Right.
And I had a lot to say.
Right.
Apparently.
And
Yeah.
semi-recently, she had, there was a chiropractic college here in New York State that
yeah.
wanted to bring Dionna in
Wow.
and talk about stroke and brain injury and the importance of being careful in your work.
Right.
Mhm.
But the college administrator said, we don't want to scare these students, so we're not going to do that. And it's like, but this is the word of wisdom
But
that
it's
these people
reality.
need to hear.
It's reality.
It is.
Exactly.
But no, we
Yeah.
don't want to touch that because it might upset. I mean,
But it's,
well then, okay, don't let them turn the news on
yeah.
if you don't want to upset them.
And it's
Exactly.
amazing though. I personally wasn't there, but your note taker, former note taker Vicky tells the story when you were doing in-person classes and had to introduce yourself to the class, and it was after lunchtime. Everybody was tired. People were falling asleep, and Dionna stood up to tell her story,
And they woke right up.
not a single person had a droopy eye for the duration of your speaking.
And you've got a gift, so keep using it.
Yeah.
Keep using it.
And that's when I listened to you talk the other night when we were on the phone. I think we were on the phone for an hour and a half.
Right.
And we got done, and I looked up and I went, "Oh, yeah, dinner is a little late, isn't it?"
I talk too much. That's my problem.
But the thing is it's you're so interesting to listen to, and you're inspiring because you have been trying to make a change, and like you said, the people that have the power to take a life, I would agree that they need this training more than other people.
Right.
So where Dionna doesn't have the credibility to stand up in front of law enforcement, and I would argue that even though I worked security at a university, so I understand, but I don't have that credibility that actual cops would care about. So it's good that someone is out there with that credibility trying to make that change.
And it's a shame it has to be like that. I actually had been asked by a hospital down outside of Richmond. Their nursing class had actually asked me to come speak. Their president asked me to come talk about autism, Alzheimer's. And I was ready to go. Well, a week before I was in Dallas teaching, and I got an email from the president of the nursing class. And it said, just let you know our administration here met, and you're not welcome to come here and talk about anything. They said that they already cover mental health issues in their training. And I said, well, I tell you what, you already know that autism is not a mental health disorder, it's a cognitive disorder. And Alzheimer's is not a mental health disorder, it's a disease. I said, let your administrators know that when they do have an unfortunate situation happen, once the lawsuit's over, I'll be glad to talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
But I can understand them thinking, why do we need a cop to come in our environment and teach us? And law enforcement, we're just as bad. Why do we need somebody from the outside coming in? And the information that if you're standing in front of law enforcement and you're an autism mom, your information is good information.
Mm-hmm.
But they just may not warm up to you unless somebody's up there who has done and goes, this is why this is important. And it's, you're credible as far as I'm concerned. But for that audience, I think having that person who's been in uniform dealing with it adds to that credibility. We're just a tough audience, and I think different professions they're particular.
Yeah, Dionna definitely has her audience.
Right.
She's going to be able to speak to those groups that are a little more sensitive. Where
law enforcement, some of us are not very sensitive.
Yeah.
But unless they're affected by it, and then they really wake up to it.
I had a internship last year.
Oh yeah.
At the
Hickok Center for Brain Injury.
Yeah, that. And they asked me to speak in a month.
Yeah.
And
you're doing for a keynote speech for a fundraiser.
Oh wow.
Yes.
And I think you're the perfect person to be able to do that.
I have no doubt.
And walking in there with my heels.
What do you've got planned?
I've actually will be done here in Rochester. I'll be headed back to Richmond next Sunday.
Okay.
I've got to go meet my daughters are going to be home from school. I'm going to give her a plug. Can't tell them too much about it, but one of my daughters, we are flying on the 1st of March to Florida to meet with a record producer because she's been approached for some of her music that she's putting TikToks out, Nicole Elise music. So I'm going down there with her to meet a producer, and we're going to talk with them and see what's going on. And I said, if this is, I didn't want to look back wondering what if. So if this is an opportunity for her, I don't want her to have to look back wondering what if. We'll go down there and meet and see how her singing goes. She's blew me away. Who didn't even realize she could write music and play music and sing music as well. Emily, my daughter, she'll be home for spring break. She gave up going to Florida for a couple of days, and then my son Caleb, he's just being closer to them, spending some time with them. I'll keep working this job that I've been blessed to get, and I've got a teaching gig set up end of May in Virginia, up in Northern Virginia in Ashburn for some law enforcement officers, and I've got a couple nonprofits that have asked me to come different places in Virginia to teach. So I'll be working, teaching when I can, working with a nonprofit. If anybody wants to contact me or has questions for me after this, my email is aawareness12@yahoo.com. I've got my own website, tim-sutton.com. And then I told you about the nonprofit, a betterunderstanding.org. Feel free to reach out to me, ask any questions if you want to talk.
Yeah.
All my contact information's on there.
And we're definitely going to stay in touch
Yeah.
because I love the work you're doing. And
Well, we'll get you on my show.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We need an excuse to travel now
There
that
you go.
I have a job that I get more vacation. And so, yeah. The Dr. Karen asks, can you please explain aphasia? Dionna, if you want to start that out, I'll give you the opportunity and then I'll fill in some blanks.
Okay, yeah. Aphasia means a loss of speech after a brain injury.
Yep.
That's
And
it.
so that's the quick and dirty of it. But
Yeah.
so what happened is Deanna's left side of her brain where the speech center lives was affected after the stroke.
Yeah.
So she had to relearn to talk, and because the main part of the brain that controls the speech is no longer there, the rest of her brain, through a process called neuroplasticity,
Yeah.
has taken over to speak. But because it's not designed for that function, it will not ever operate 100%. And that causes aphasia. So it's basically like, for us people that don't live with it, like a never-ending brain fart, where every
Yeah.
word, almost every word that you can think of, you know in your head, but it just won't come out.
Wow.
And it's surprising in that it's not always the same word. And sometimes simple words you mess up. Sometimes it's complex words.
But I know
Yeah.
a couple of long words.
Yeah, we'll be driving down the road and you'll be like, oh, that word. And I'll be like, I can't even pronounce that word. But it's a disconnect between her thought process and the speech center. And so and it affects everybody to different degrees.
Well, my stroke was severe. I was no speech, no language, no anything, not reading, writing, or speaking for months.
Well, and if you look at one of your latest brain scans, I'm not even being a little facetious, exaggerating. That's what I'm looking for when I say like 90% of this side of her brain is black, which means there's no neural activity there.
Wow.
And it's amazing your speech, how it is now.
So that's amazing to think about that.
And she's gone through many intense therapies, speech and language therapy, to get that far. But
over 11 years.
Wow.
Wildman says your brain knows what it wants to say, but getting the message to the mouth gets scrambled. Yep.
Yeah.
I like to say there's like Swiss cheese, and you're trying to go through the cheese, and there's holes where there's no cheese there.
Yeah, exactly right.
Do we have any more questions from the chat? Give it a couple more minutes. Tim, any last thoughts?
No, I'll share something with you. You just prompted a memory. Wow.
Yeah.
You want to show that to your main camera?
It's amazing what you are able to do.
Yeah.
But you talk about the Swiss cheese, and I use that analogy when I teach. I actually, our agency actually had a senior citizen police academy where people could come and they go to class once a week to learn kind of what law enforcement does. And I got a captain came to me one day and said, hey, this lady, she's going to ride with this deputy because they would do ride-alongs. Her husband's going to ride with you. He's got Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, okay, am I going to have to handcuff him to me? Because if I go out there and lose him, well, he rode with me and he was able to talk to me and tell me about his Alzheimer's. But he'd only been living in the area for about a year, but we'd ride down the road and he's like, oh, I remember that building. They've built that about 10 years ago. And, oh yeah, okay. And so I started asking him questions. I said, so your memories, Alzheimer's is taking a lot of your memories. And I said, if I were to ask you a question or ask you to remember something, how would you remember it? He said, well, it would be like a piece of Swiss cheese. He said, I have this memory, but there are holes missing. And I said, so it's there, but when you try to relay it, those holes are there and you can't tell the whole story. And he said, yeah, pretty much. Well, I got a call. We got a call from the deputy who had his wife. She said, I just took her home. She said, you can bring him by the house. And we were in a parking lot, going through a convenience store parking lot. And I said, I want you to tell me how to get to your house. And he goes, okay, you go out here, take a left. I took a left. And he started saying, crash, flash, ash. And then we saw a sign that said slash drive. He goes, slash, that's it right there. So we turn in. And I said, what now? He goes, there's a circle. There's a circle up there. It's a circle. And I looked at the end of the street and there was a satellite dish. And I said, is that it? He goes, that's a satellite dish, not dish, stupid. And I'm like,
Stupid.
okay. So he goes, turn right. So I turned right. At the end of the road, there was a house that had a half circle window.
Oh.
So we drove in. I was talking to him. It was a Friday night. And the next Monday, I was supposed to be at a church for a triad meeting with a bunch of people. So I told the wife said, are you going to be there Monday morning? I said, yes, ma'am, I'm going to be. I'm supposed to speak. And she shook my hand. He said, hey, Monday morning, I'm going to be there, but I'm not going to remember who you are. And I said, not a problem. I'm going to introduce myself to you again. So we shook a hand. Well, Monday morning came. And I come in and I go over to talk with our Commonwealth attorney. We have Commonwealth attorneys or our DAs. And I was talking to him. I felt somebody tap me on the back. And I turned around and he goes, Tim. I said, hey, how are you doing? I said, it's so good to see you. He walked off and the wife came over and said, he practiced that all weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to see the impact that makes, what's going on in his mind and the struggles that he's dealing with and she's dealing with. But it was so important to him to remember who I was that he practiced all weekend.
Practice makes perfect.
And that's, that's the rewarding part you get. As a police officer, you can go out there and lock up this person, lock up that person. But, you're doing your job and you get some gratification. But I can tell you, when somebody with Parkinson's, dementia, or something wanders off, or Alzheimer's or autism, and you go out there and that family thinks they're never seeing them again.
Mm-hmm.
And you can walk them back through the door and the family just starts bawling. That feeling, I don't care who you lock up, but nothing compares to the feeling you can do is bring somebody, their loved one back, who they never expected to see again.
Yeah.
So I would encourage all agencies to get involved in a tracking system. There are a few of them out there. So it's just another aspect of being able to care for your community.
Yeah.
And build those relationships.
I love that.
Wow.
So,
Well, Tim, thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate it.
It's wonderful. What a small world. Thank you so much, Steph, for getting us in touch.
Yeah,
She's a great trainer. She's teaching me a lot.
She's awesome. Yeah. Perfect. Dionna, if you want to go ahead and close out the show, no more questions.
Good luck on your journey.
Thank you. You as well.
Yeah. And see you next time.
Yep.
All right.
And we are, just real quick, we're going to put a link to your nonprofit down in the show
Yes.
notes below. Everybody make sure to go check that out.
And check out emily'sbracelets.com.
You'll put that in the
Be
show notes
amazed.
too.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.